Welcome to the store. Don't forget to subscribe, and support me.
The election season had already been tense, but when the news hit, everything spiraled out of control. Nathan Gray was standing on stage, a confident smile spreading across his face as thousands of his supporters roared. He was the front-runner, charismatic, promising a future of innovation and economic prosperity, and had swept the globe with his unapologetic vision for change. The Earth was on the verge of its next great leap forward, and Nathan, with his endless ambition, seemed like the man to take it there. Then the news broke. First, it was a small report from an independent news site, the kind people ignored at first. But it quickly spread like wildfire. Nathan Gray, the man who spoke of humanity's greatness, of Earth's independence and its future as a leader in the galaxy, was secretly dealing with aliens, the Zilani. Suddenly, the noise in the auditorium died down. Faces filled with confusion. Cell phones lit up as people scrolled through the latest updates. It was on every social media feed, every news channel. The word traitor began circulating. Nathan, still on stage, froze for a moment before addressing the crowd, his voice firm, trying to control the narrative. But it was too late. Elena Mercer, Nathan's opponent and the pragmatic scientist-turned-politician, sat in her campaign office watching the chaos unfold on her screen. She had expected the final weeks of the election to be tough, but this was unprecedented. As the media dissected the claims, talking heads debated the implications, and political pundits speculated on the future, Elena's mind was racing. She had spent her life preparing for this moment, building her platform on science, reason, and transparency. But now, it wasn't just a political battle. It was something much larger. The Zilani had always been a mystery to humanity, a distant race with technology that could solve Earth's most pressing problems: environmental decay, disease, resource scarcity. But they had never made direct contact, not until now. The idea that one of Earth's leading political candidates had been working with them, in secret no less, was not only shocking, it was terrifying. It wasn't long before her team rushed in, faces pale. "We need to respond, immediately," her campaign manager, Sarah, said breathlessly. "The networks are going crazy." Elena nodded, eyes narrowing as she leaned forward. "We're going to play this carefully," she said, her voice steady. "We can't just throw accusations around without proof. We need to find out what Nathan's been doing with them, what he's offering. And most importantly, who else is involved." Sarah bit her lip. "It's not just Nathan. There are whispers about another alien race, one more powerful than the Zilani." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "The Orionids," she whispered. She had heard rumors, distant whispers of the Orionids, a race so powerful they controlled entire systems without anyone even realizing it. They didn't conquer planets with weapons or warships, they did it with subtle manipulation, political influence, and control over the very systems of governance. It was said they could topple governments without ever firing a shot. Sarah nodded grimly. "If they're involved, this election isn't just about who wins anymore. It's about who controls Earth." Nathan, meanwhile, was desperately trying to salvage his campaign. In a hastily arranged interview, he appeared calm and collected. He admitted to having contact with the Zilani, but he framed it as an opportunity for humanity, a chance to collaborate with a civilization far more advanced. "They have the technology to save our planet," he said, his voice smooth but edged with desperation. "The Zilani only want to help. They see the potential in humanity. They want us to be part of something greater, part of an interstellar alliance that could bring peace, prosperity, and technological breakthroughs beyond our imagination." But his words fell on a divided audience. Some saw him as a visionary, someone willing to push the boundaries of what was possible for Earth. Others saw him as a traitor, someone who would sell out the planet for power, for control. In a small, dimly lit newsroom across town, Jacob Ross, the reporter who had broken the story, was knee-deep in research. Something about the whole situation wasn't sitting right with him. He had stumbled upon Nathan's connection with the Zilani through a leak, but the more he dug, the more he realized that there was something far bigger at play. The Zilani weren't the real threat, at least, not in the way everyone thought. The more Jacob read about them, the more he became convinced that they genuinely wanted to help Earth. But there was another layer to this. His sources were whispering about the Orionids, a race that had remained in the shadows for centuries. They had been watching Earth, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and it seemed this election was that moment. Jacob's phone buzzed. A message from a source he hadn't heard from in months. Dr. Isabel Lark, an exopolitical expert who had been studying alien influence on Earth for years. The message was simple: we need to meet. There's more to this than you realize. As the days ticked down to the election, public opinion swung wildly. Protests erupted in cities around the world, some in support of Nathan, some demanding his immediate withdrawal. The internet was flooded with conspiracy theories, some claiming the Zilani had been controlling Earth for years, others suggesting the Orionids were behind every major political event of the last century. In her war room, Elena watched as the polls fluctuated. Her campaign had been focused on logic, on science, on fixing Earth's problems with human ingenuity. But now, that platform seemed almost quaint compared to the galactic stakes. They've turned this election into a circus, she muttered, watching as the latest poll numbers flashed on the screen. Nathan was still holding on to a substantial portion of the vote, despite the scandal. It's the promise, Sarah said, her eyes glued to the screen. People are desperate for change. The Zilani are offering them miracles. How do we compete with that? Elena didn't answer. Her mind was elsewhere, on the Orionids. She had received her own intelligence reports about them. They were masters of manipulation, playing civilizations like chess pieces. But they were also careful, subtle. They wouldn't have made a move unless they were sure of the outcome. We need to make this about Earth, Elena finally said, her voice firm. This election isn't about Nathan, or the Zilani, or even the Orionids. It's about us. About who we are as a species, and whether we're willing to let outsiders decide our fate. She paused, taking a deep breath. We need to expose the Orionids. If we don't, they'll control us long before we even realize it. The summit was hastily arranged. It was the last chance for Earth's leaders to come together before Election Day. Representatives from every major nation gathered in a high-tech facility, deep underground, away from prying eyes. Nathan and Elena were both there, along with a small delegation of Zilani ambassadors. The tension in the room was palpable. Nathan, ever the showman, took the floor first. We stand at the crossroads of history, he began, his voice smooth and practiced. The Zilani have offered us a chance to join them in a new age of prosperity. They can help us fix the problems we've been unable to solve on our own: climate change, resource depletion, disease. They want us to thrive. The Zilani representatives, tall and elegant with their shimmering silver skin and glowing eyes, stood silently behind him, their mere presence enough to fill the room with an otherworldly energy. Elena rose next. Her face was calm, but her voice carried a weight that silenced the room. Nathan talks about the Zilani like they're our saviors, but what he's not telling you is that there's another force at play here. A force that doesn't want to help us, they want to control us. The room shifted, uncomfortable murmurs spreading through the crowd. The Orionids have been manipulating us for decades, Elena continued, her eyes scanning the room. They've been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, they see their chance. If we let them, they will decide Earth's future. Not us. Jacob, who had managed to secure a seat at the back of the room, felt a chill run down his spine. This was bigger than he'd thought. Much bigger. The murmurs in the room grew louder, filling the air with tension as Elena's words sunk in. Everyone was on edge, their gazes flicking nervously between the Zilani delegation and Elena. Nathan stood silent, his usual bravado momentarily faltering. The Zilani representatives remained statuesque, their faces unreadable, but there was a ripple in the atmosphere as if something unspoken had passed between them. Elena continued, her voice steady. We have a choice before us. We can accept the help of the Zilani, and perhaps in doing so, give away more than we bargained for. Or we can choose to face the challenges of our planet with our own ingenuity. The Orionids will not help us. They see us as a potential threat, a species that could one day challenge their dominance. If we fall into their trap now, they will tighten their grip until we have no freedom left. A silence fell over the room, thick with the weight of her words. For the first time, the Zilani ambassador, Silerin, stepped forward. His silver skin shimmered under the artificial lights, and his deep, melodic voice filled the space. We do not come to control you, he said calmly. We have seen what is happening to your world, and we believe in your potential. We wish to help. Nathan seized the moment, stepping beside Silerin. This is the future, right here, he declared, his voice rising with passion. They're offering us a chance to avoid extinction, to thrive as part of a greater alliance. We cannot turn our backs on this opportunity. Elena's eyes narrowed as she watched Nathan. He was a master of rhetoric, skilled at twisting the narrative to fit his goals. But this wasn't just about Earth's survival anymore, it was about autonomy, about whether humanity would forge its own destiny or become a pawn in the games of galactic empires. Jacob leaned forward in his seat, his heart pounding. He had come too far not to push for the truth. He stood up, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on him. What about the Orionids? He asked, his voice cutting through the silence. We've heard whispers of their involvement, but no one's confirmed it. Are they really behind all of this? Silerin's gaze turned toward Jacob, his expression unreadable. The Orionids have their own interests in this sector of the galaxy, he said, carefully measured. But they are not involved in your election. Their methods are indirect. Elena stepped forward, her face set in determination. That's exactly the problem, she said. Their methods are indirect. They influence without you even realizing it. They push, nudge, and shape events behind the scenes. If we align ourselves with any external force, Zilani or Orionid, we lose control of our own fate. Nathan scoffed, shaking his head. And you think we can handle this all on our own? Look around. Our planet is on the brink of collapse. We need their help, and if you're too blind to see that, then you're dooming humanity. Tension crackled in the air. Elena stared at Nathan, her eyes fierce. No, she said, her voice low but steady. I'm giving humanity a chance to stand on its own 2 feet. We've faced impossible odds before, and we've survived. We've innovated, adapted, and persevered. We can do it again, but only if we believe in ourselves. The minute we hand over our future to an alien power, we lose everything that makes us human. A murmur of agreement rippled through part of the crowd, while others remained skeptical. Nathan turned to the room, his arms outstretched. You're all smart enough to know what's at stake here. We can't afford to let pride or fear of the unknown stop us from doing what's right for the planet. But the room was split. The world was split. Outside, protests continued, streets filled with people on both sides of the issue. Some held signs praising the Zilani as saviors, while others decried them as invaders. The media churned out endless reports, spinning every word from both candidates into a storm of speculation and outrage. Jacob sat back down, his mind racing. He had to find the truth behind all of this, the real truth. His phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Isabel Lark. We've been tracking Orionid activity, the message read. They're making moves, but it's subtle. Be careful. They don't like being exposed. Jacob's pulse quickened. If the Orionids were pulling strings, this election was about more than just who would lead Earth. It was about whether humanity would ever be truly free from outside control. Election day arrived with the weight of the world bearing down on it. Polling stations were flooded with people, the air thick with uncertainty and tension. The Zilani's presence loomed over every conversation, and Nathan's campaign had successfully convinced a large portion of the population that aligning with them was the only viable path forward. But Elena's message of independence, of human ingenuity and strength, had resonated deeply with others. The hours dragged by, each vote cast feeling like a step toward an uncertain future. The media tried to keep up with the wave of emotions sweeping through the streets, interviews with passionate voters on both sides, debates over the morality of aligning with aliens, and constant speculation about how the Orionids might be involved. Even though they had stayed out of the public as the sun set, the world held its breath. News channels switched to election coverage, the results trickling in slowly. Jacob was in the thick of it, tracking leads on the Orionids, talking to sources, trying to uncover any last-minute developments. His phone buzzed constantly, the latest tip directing him to a government server supposedly hacked by Orionid agents. He had no proof, but his gut told him it was real. Back in Elena's campaign headquarters, the mood was tense. Her team hovered over their screens, watching the results come in. It was close, closer than anyone had anticipated. Nathan was holding strong, buoyed by his promise of technological salvation through the Zilani, but Elena's message had struck a chord with those who feared losing humanity's autonomy. Elena herself was seated in her office, her hands clasped tightly as she watched the numbers. It was now or never. She had put everything on the line, her career, her beliefs, her vision for Earth. And now, all she could do was wait. Suddenly, the screens flashed. The final votes were in. Elena Mercer had won by the narrowest of margins. The room erupted in cheers, her campaign team hugging each other, voices filled with relief and triumph. But Elena remained seated, her gaze distant. She had won the election, but the real battle was just beginning. Later that night, in a global address broadcast across every network, Elena stood before the world. Her face was calm, composed, but her words carried the gravity of the moment. The people of Earth have spoken, she began. Today, we chose to chart our own course, to face the challenges of our world with the strength and intelligence that defines us. We have turned down the offer of the Zilani, not out of fear, but out of a belief in ourselves. The Zilani's help may have seemed like an easy solution, but history has taught us that shortcuts often come at a cost too high to bear. Her gaze was steady as she addressed the more sensitive part of her speech. And to the Orionids, she said, her voice hardening, we are aware of your presence. We know you've been watching, waiting. But this planet is not for you to control. Humanity will stand on its own." There was a shift in the air as she spoke those words, a ripple that seemed to travel across the planet. For the first time, Earth was sending a message to the galaxy, not just to the Zilani, but to any who might seek to control them. Earth was not a prize to be won. The Zilani would have to respect the decision, and the Orionids, for all their subtlety and power, had been exposed. They wouldn't strike openly, not yet, but the shadow of their influence would linger, a reminder of the delicate balance Earth now found itself in. Elena stepped down from the podium, her heart heavy but resolute. She had done what she set out to do. But as she looked out over the city, with its streets still full of people celebrating or mourning the outcome, she knew this was only the beginning of a much larger journey for humanity. Somewhere, far off in the depths of the galaxy, the Orionids were watching, waiting for their next move. But for now, at least, Earth had held its ground.